Uh, 54-7 to the Springboks this weekend against the Barbarians in not great conditions in Cape Town Stadium. Another sort of thing for the argument about having tests in or big games in July in Cape Town, June and July. But we're going to talk about the BOKS. With me is former Springbok and Italian coach Nick Mallet, somebody with a vast experience of that, and Gavin Rich, my colleague at Supersport. Gavin, Nick, welcome, guys.
Thanks, Brendan.
How's it, Brendan? Surely that should be when you say Italian coach, it should be Italy coach. Because if you say Italian, it sounds like that's his nationality, which we know it isn't.
I stand corrected. That's great.
Yeah.
Nick, maybe start with you. You obviously you're sitting across the world in Paris at the moment, but what was your take on the BOK game? Obviously, not the Barbarian game that we all wanted.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that sprang to mind there. First of all, it's very, very difficult to get a group of players, picked out of the Japanese league, picked out of New Zealand, some playing in Europe, and in 10 days, get them to be competitive against a test side that's had 3 or 4 alignment camps, understand each other really well, and have prepared. They prepared as though it was a test match. So. You've got to be very careful with these sort of games. I think, and I'm talking from the Barbarians' point of view. When I coached them, I didn't go along the lines of the Barbarians always play a running game. We always are here just to entertain, etc. I coached the team to win. I said it just depended on the conditions. First of all, that's absolutely vital, and also the opposition's strengths and weaknesses. I said. When we played against New Zealand, it was a lovely day at Twickenham, but they had a really good side. And I said, if we don't defend well, if we don't defend for 5, 6, 7, 8 phases well, they're going to clean us up. And luckily, I had Southern Hemisphere players there who really got stuck in. And then against South Africa, the year later, we had a really good backline, and we took it to them through the backs, and we managed to out attack them and their defense, put their defense under pressure. So a lot of what I was doing was trying to win. I think the pleasure comes from winning in any competitive sport, and this to try and run the ball in cold, rainy weather in Cape Town. Is madness. People could say that South Africa didn't enter into the spirit of things because we had a kicking game, but that's exactly how you have to play. So 2 things. First of all, the underprepared nature of the Barbarians team, and secondly, they couldn't get their hands on the ball. It took them, I think, 40 minutes to get one set piece in the Springbok 22. So you've got to actually play a territorial game. You've got to transfer pressure onto them, kick. Force the BOKS to make mistakes, and they didn't do that. So it wasn't very successful.
Yeah, I would say, Brendan, that adding on to what Nick was saying, it sounds like a funny thing for a rugby writer to say this, because then it makes it sound like I'm not doing my job. But I almost lost a bit of interest in the game after 10 minutes, because I just sort of thought, well, you could see what was coming. It all became predictable after that. That first try. I can't remember who kicked it, but they kicked it into the corner. The Barbarians wing went back and grabbed it, and then passed it inside to that poor fly half. That 23-year-old guy, he looked like he was just like completely stunned. What's the word I'm looking for? Like a deer in the headlights. And he caught the ball and dropped it over his try line, and that set the pattern for the game, because then the Springboks scored a driving maul try to Malcolm Marx from that field position, and then it wasn't long after that the ball was kicked onto him again. And I think he was still recovering from that first mistake. And he knocked it on. And then the Springboks had a good field position for a scrum. And from there, if I remember correctly, the ball was kicked onto Colby. The BOKS were very good at that sort of that type of attack on the day. And Colby went over and scored in the corner. And to me, that was it. That was like, this is the way the Barbarians are going to play, and this is the way the BOKS are going to play. There's not that much sort of doubt anymore about who's going to win the game, and that the Springboks will win. And I thought they played perfectly. Very good wet weather game. The BOKS. They attacked from the right areas. Whereas the Barbarians, I do feel sorry for. I know that I don't follow social media like you, Brendan, but you told me yesterday that Robbie Deans was taking flack. I wouldn't. I think that's a bit offside, because I think when you are I mean, Nick says he played to win, and I know Nick does play to win. He plays to win. I mean, I played charades against him in Plettenberg Bay 30 years ago, and he took it extremely seriously. Yeah, Robbie. I mean, I spoke to Robbie a bit during the week building up, and he was wanting as far as possible to enter into the Barbarian spirit, and that was the whole talk before the game. Everybody kept talking about that. I mean, I saw the podcasts, and everybody was talking about playing that rugby. So I can understand it from his point of view. And when you get a team together, I mean, you can't judge a coach on regardless of how they set up in the game. Just judge them on a week in Cape Town where, on Wednesday. I mean, Nick, you went in Cape Town, fortunately for you, but I don't think I've seen weather. I mean, we were at a clip drift function at Hamilton's. And looking out the window during that lunchtime, and apparently the Barbarians were training around about that time. Looking out the window, it looked like Hamilton's was a dam, was a paddy field. So he was on a hiding to nothing.
Yeah. Just to add on to what you said, I think I spoke about the Barbarians and what they didn't do right. I thought the Springboks got everything right. I thought the kicking, the pressure, putting the receiver under pressure, the way in which our wings contested it. But what I really liked was the intelligence of the second last player. We had Fati once where that you just mentioned that little grubber through on his right foot and he's left-footed, beautifully weighted for Colby. And also Damien Dallander, putting it, we call it coffin corner, it's into the corner where the fullback has to come up and take the last man, and your blindside wing is covering to try and help you. And you just leave it there, either just short of the in-goal area or just short of touch. And there's nothing that covering wing can do except either kick it out or else do something stupid, which will give you a penalty or a turnover try. So I really like the way their kicking game, their offensive kicking game, and they stuck to it right through. This is the way to play rugby in this sort of weather. And I don't care what's coming. We're just going to continue to do that. And I really liked it. Good driving mauls. Nice to see Damien Dallander and Jesse Creel coming in to help on that first drive over try. The two centers, I mean, they're big guys anyway, so they made a big difference. And Colby, I think we just chat about the back three. I think that Colby and Orange and Fasti really did outstandingly well. They were very good under difficult conditions. I mean, Colby just is outstanding, a little pocket rocket and great in the air, but superb feet on the and just impossible to stop on a day like that.
You mentioned the midfield there, Nick, and I know. Sorry, Brendan, you must actually talk, but. You mentioned the midfield, and when you're at the game, sometimes you can watch things. So I said that I sort of switched off after 10 minutes. I mean, that's not entirely true. Obviously, I was very interested in how the Boks were going to do. It was just that the interest in the game from a sort of competitive point of view had gone. But I spent quite a bit of time watching those two centers, Delende and Creel, and I mean, there was it's sort of a change in the way rugby was played long ago, like many decades ago, when centres became auxiliary flankers. I mean, Dick Muir, and I remember there was a guy, Scott Lenine from Scotland, and there were a couple of guys who did it way back then, and obviously the Kiwis. But those two players, their work rate is incredible. I mean, we might talk just now about Andre Esterhuizen being a centre who played loose forward, but it's almost like they have the work rate of loose forwards, those two guys. I mean, I think that they're such a big part of South Africa's success. I'm talking about those two particular centres, but obviously Rassie will coach other centres to do the same. But I just thought that they were outstanding on the day.
Very true.
Yeah, I think Gav. Sorry, come in here. I agree with you, Gav. I mean, those two really have sort of almost established themselves. I mean, Andre Esterhuizen and the Kanye who are the next guys and could walk into any team in the world, probably are going to struggle to get back into that starting lineup. But there's a trend that's also coming. Is we spoke about Fassi, but I mean, Damian Willems is still around. Where's he going to fit in? And we're going to get to a point where we've got 3-4 players in each position, and that's an amazing position to be in for a coach. I mean, just look at Flav. When you pick the way Marnie kicked in that second half in those terrible conditions, and you've got a guy like Sasha, who's obviously amazing talent, and then you've still got Andre Pollard, who's the clutch kicker. I mean, you can basically almost play horses for courses in 2 or 3 different teams. You're getting almost to that level at the moment.
Yeah, it's not just sorry, Nick. It's just it's not just about horses for courses. to me, it's about, and I think that if you spoke to the conditioning coach, Andy Edwards, he would probably admit this as part of it. South Africa needs a lot of depth because of the situation we're in. And it's my hobby horse that the 12-month season just doesn't work. And South Africa playing in the Rugby Championship when Ireland and all those players are resting, and then playing URC and Champions Cup when the Kiwis are watching cricket in New Zealand. To me, that's just unsustainable. But the only way we can maybe sustain that is actually if we just build up such incredible depth and give as many players as possible international experience, so that when there are injuries, and there will be, I mean, we know about Eben's problems and other players that have struggled during the season and are struggling to keep themselves at optimum, let's say, for an entire season, which these days the word season doesn't exist. So it's a year-round occupation. We need that depth. South Africa needs that depth more than anybody does, just because you have to have players because people are going to get injured. You mentioned Damian Willemse. He didn't play that much rugby this last season being the Northern season in South Africa's case. And now he's been obviously suspended. But, when he comes back, hopefully he'll be fresh. But the other players that have struggled and have been playing a lot of rugby.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, I think that the one wonderful thing about the Springbok setup is that every player is desperate to play for them. So, we're coming into a period which is downtime for the URC, downtime for the Champions Cup, and that it's uptime for the Springboks. And as you say, Gavin, the guys, it's not just one season; it's actually 3 consecutive seasons. You can go back to the British Lions. Prior to the British Lions, there's certain players, Peter Steph du Toit, Eben Etzebeth. We've already got those injuries to Kitsop and Malherbe, for example, that are pretty much career-threatening. You have to give these Springboks, you've got to rotate the Springbok side to ensure that they'll get to 2027 in good shape. And what I love about it is it's great from a conditioning point of view. It allows the older guys to recover, to mentor the players coming in. It takes away jealousy and it takes away this whole feeling of being dropped. You're rotating, you're resting. The other guy's been given an opportunity. When you're going to come back and play your next game. I mean, usually Rusty gives the guys months ahead. He says, these are our plans. So players know that they haven't been forgotten. And so it's not just holding tackle bags all the time and getting really disappointed and depressed. The guys are working all the time. Either the team, the 23 that have been selected, are working to beat the replacements who are sitting there trying to play like the opposition on Saturday. So there's work for even the guys who are not even starting. I mean, they really work hard. And as you say, Brendan, the playoff situation, where you've got Thatcher and Marnie as well as Pollard. I mean, we're in a really good position there. That's going to be incredibly competitive, and they're all going to play well. I'm convinced of it. It's what the All Blacks were like when they were dominating world rugby. The pressure came from within the squad. It didn't come from outside. They weren't concerned about what Australia or South Africa could throw at them. They were really concerned about what was inside their squad and who was going to take their place. So our guys are working incredibly hard because they know that Rusty is going to use this system to try and get 45, 50 players to be in a situation where they can step into a test match, semi-final of a World Cup without really battling.
I was going to say the one thing that Rusty did say to us about a week ago in that first press conference is that the plan is more or less, and it's obviously as long as everything goes well, to give the older guys 6 or 7 tests this year and all the youngsters 6 or 7 tests. So they're going to see a lot of mix and matching through the year as well. It's going to be interesting to see what they do this weekend. Just before we get to obviously the Italy thing, I just want to ask you guys on in terms of the front row. They got a bit of stick. They obviously they weren't as dominant as we used to. It's not that it was a bad scrumming performance, but it obviously wasn't what we used to with the Springbok set piece. And we are pretty thin at loosehead at the moment. We had Don Himman up yesterday, and he didn't seem very concerned about it. He said, yeah, the guys have to get some. That second half front row basically didn't have any caps, and Jan-Hendrik Wessels had 3 caps, I think was. So very inexperienced front row. But just your thoughts on that and just where and how the scrum's looking?
Yeah.
I just thought you mentioned the second half with the guys being inexperienced, and you say Don addressed that. I actually thought that I was more concerned about some of the scrums in the first half rather than the second half. They started off really well, and then Russie was asked the question by a journalist in the press conference, and the journalist prefaced his question by saying that Asanati was really good. He was brilliant, I think he said. And then Russie, being quite diplomatic, but also at the same time wanting to be honest, said, "No, I wouldn't say he was brilliant. I would say that he was solid." And then he admitted that there's work to do there. So that probably is the case. I mean, you talk about loose heads. We have a lack of loose heads. I mean, we did have Ox on the field in that first half, and we had Marks. Didn't Don mention the strength of the opposition though? I don't know that much about French rugby, but apparently the tight heads are amongst the best scrummagers in France. I don't know if you know more about that, Nick.
Yeah, they did pick a solid front row. You had Healy on the loose head side, in fact, against our tight head, and I thought he handled him well early on. But then Healy has the tendency to swing his bum out and go in, and the moment that happens, the tight head has to follow him. And when you're a big tight head and you get a small, stocky loose head, what happens is the bigger guy tends to go to ground first. And I didn't think the ref was very good about that. You've got to stay absolutely square. And I didn't think Healy was really square. And then when we moved to the second half, so I agree with Rusty. I think he's only 26 years old, Abdelkani. So he's got a lot of growing to do in terms of experience. And we know that tight heads take it, in their 30s before they start becoming at their best in terms of what the opposition is trying to do and how you negate that. So in the second half, I thought that Neetlan Fouché, who's one of the top scrummagers in the URC, I thought he had a hard time against the loose head, against the front row that came on. So they did select two very good front rows. And he had, I don't know whether you call it the disadvantage, but he had a centre pushing, but it's a centre who weighs 120 odd kilograms. So he should be, have been, Easthuizen should have been, heavy enough to hold him in his place. But they did get on top, and maybe that's a bit to do with the hooker, a bit to do with the first time they've worked together. But it's all a learning process, and I know that Neetlan Fouché is a top loose head. I know Wessels is a very good up and coming loose head. So we've got strength in depth. Remember, we've still got Steenkamp to come as well as Koch, Vincent Koch if we have to, and Thomas du Toit and Wilco Lowe. I mean, we've got plenty. We've really got plenty of good players.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot for us to start panicking about scrums. I mean, just one odd scrum where we don't dominate isn't so. I mean, I watched the baby box on Sunday playing against Australia, and they completely destroyed them. And it was a great all-round game, and the junior box played sort of total rugby. But again, the scrum, just those forwards, just the forwards that are the youngsters that are coming through. It's just phenomenal. So I don't think that there's ever going to be a time in South Africa again. I mean, there may have been times back in the last 40 years or so, but I don't think there's going to be a time again where we're going to be too worried about the scrum.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Gavin, on what you said there, Don did say that he did speak to the scrum coach, who was apparently Racing's head coach, and he said that he did pick these two old hands who are the two best tight heads in his opinion in France. So and Don was quite happy with that because they want the test. That's the one thing. The other thing he did say, he said there were some things that they also got wrong when Andre Easthuizen moved to flank, because at one stage he scrummed on the loose head side and then he switched to the tight head side, and that wasn't the plan. He said, but we'll get that right. Typical Don in his dry way. So the box are also learning, and I mean we can easily see 15 different guys coming to play on Saturday against Italy as well. Maybe before we get to Italy, just on Andre Easthuizen becoming a flank, we sit in a country with so many flankers and so many. We never struggle to find flankers. In fact, we struggle to get them all into a team. And now we've got a hybrid players. I mean, it's nothing new, but I suppose it gives a new dimension to the 7-1 bench and those sort of things that we could start seeing some interesting Russie's interesting selections in the future.
It's interesting we have Nick on here, because he sort of actually was the first person to float the concept of a hybrid player way back in the 1990s, when he used to talk about it. Never ever happened, but there was talk at one stage of Bob Skinstad playing centre. It was,
Yeah,
and I always remember, and I always think of that whenever they do talk about these hybrid players. Was that it's been something we've been talking about for probably 30 years.
when I was coaching False Bay, I used Laurent Caban as an inside centre. He was absolutely outstanding for us. I mean, he was, open side flanker for the French side, but he had such good hand skills, such good passing skills. His lines of running were so good. His defence was outstanding. I mean, he was just brilliant at the centre. So you're right, Brendan. We do produce a lot of great loose forwards, but I think when you replaced who did he come on for?
John du Plessis went off injured.
Oh yes. He's, I mean, for me, he's much more a Peter Steph du Toit type of flank rather than a fetcher. I don't think he's ever going to be a fetcher, but he should be a big ball carrier. He should be a physical, cleaner of ruck, taking out, making 20 tackles a game. And I don't see why he can't do that. I mean, he also has the offloading skills, which he's learned from playing centre. So when you're 120 odd kilos and 6'3", 6'4", and you're playing centre off flank, I mean, it does help your bench. It really does help your bench. So I don't know if it was an outstanding success. I don't think he suddenly sort of made all the loose forwards stand up and think, geez, we're going to lose our place to Easthuizen. But if you're planning on doing a 6-1 or a 7-1 or 6-2, I mean, he's an ideal bloke to have as a cover at loose forward.
It wasn't the first time he's played there either, Brendan. He did. I'm talking from memory now, but Plum definitely did use him in an emergency situation at some stage of the URC, and I can't remember which game. Normally, I remember these things, but he definitely was. And I remember John Plumtree, obviously, saying that that they'd been looking at that as an option for a while, because of the size and all that. So, and maybe I don't think Rusty speaks that much to the Sharks coaches, but I was going to say maybe there was a message from the management that had come through, but maybe it did filter through. Maybe it came from Andre. Maybe Andre himself said, listen, they want to use me as a flank at national level.
I think there's two things there. Is one, I think, first of all, going back to what I said about the props and that, and now this as well, I think sometimes we're in such a good position as in Springbok rugby, is that there's not really many talking points. I mean, the selection's basically the talking point this week. There's not much else. So I think people do sort of jump on sort of like the if we don't dominate the scrums and something like Andre, which is a bit unique. I also don't see it as something. And also, Rusty likes to keep people guessing and keep opposition coaches talking and wondering what he's going to do. So that's also part of it, I suppose, as well. But Italy this week,
think guys used Colby, for example. He's often used Colby in a scrum off. I think he's brought Dallander in to jump at the front of the line-out once, or he's Easthuizen I've seen jumping in the line-out for driving more. So he's always coming up with some little different play that the opposition haven't seen before, and I love that about him. I love the fact that every test match there's the opposition can only analyze the box to a certain extent, but they certainly can't analyze exactly what they're going to be doing every weekend.
Yeah, I wish we saw the move a bit more, that one from 2019, the ball in the midfield. That would have been, I think we can use that a bit more as well. Nick, on Italy this week, they've obviously, they're a side that tend to always just be on the brink of that breakthrough, but they never seem to get that breakthrough. And I mean, they've in the Six Nations, they looked at stages the last couple of years very good, but they just don't seem to get there. What are you expecting from them?
I mean, listen. I think they really deserve their place in their Six Nations. They've beaten Wales, I think, 2 or 3 times in a row. They pushed England to a 1 point. When I say 1 point, to within one score of winning. They've pushed France. I mean, they drew with France last year in particular. They had a very, very good Six Nations. I think they won 2 and drew 1, I think. And this year, I mean, they pushed. I mean, they had a bad start. I can't remember who it was against. They took a 50-odd points. But then they got back into it. In the last 2 games, they played really well. If you look at the way they've structured their rugby, it's not unlike Ireland. They've got, instead of having 4 provincial sides, they've got 2 in Treviso and Benetton, which is out of Treviso. and also Zebre. And they use Zebre as a sort of academy team, a couple of good overseas players to give them experience, but then a lot of the under-23s, under-21s go to Zebre, and the main internationals are played out of Benetton. And they've done really well. I mean, they've been very competitive in the URC. So when you get all their players on the field, I think, they've got a decent scrum. You put 70 points past Namibia, you're doing something right. There must be something going right. And the coach, the Argentinian coach, has done an excellent job. He's got a really nice balance between playing a sort of a territorial game, but and an aggressive defensive game, as well as nice ball in hand attack where they hold on to the ball a lot. They do a lot of double pulls to try and get the ball out wide. And Meninchella and Brex are absolutely outstanding. The two centers, I would say, two best centers in the URC. And in international rugby, in fact, in the Six Nations. They really played well. So they've got some talented players, good pack of forwards. But as always, they've probably got, I would say, 10 international quality players, and then they're patching up the rest with another 10 club quality players, whereas South Africa's sitting with 30 to 40 international quality players. And that's the big difference. The strength in depth is really difficult to get in Italy. I'll just give you some figures. You pick an international side out of 17,000 registered rugby players in Italy, only 17. In the Western Cape alone, there are 90,000 registered rugby players. So in the whole of South Africa, I think there are 250 or 300,000 registered rugby players. So when you think that includes women's rugby, Old Crocs rugby, children's rugby, you're basically selecting from about 3,000 rugby players. So they punch above their weight, but I don't think they're going to be able to match the BOKS in these next two tests. For them to get a score of around about 30 points to 10 will be very good for Italy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember when you were still coaching those two tests, they were, almost 200 points in two games there. They're not quite there at the moment. They're a bit better than that nowadays, but they're not quite. Huh?
Was it as bad as that? I remember.
I never conceded 200 points. We lost to the Springboks 24-15.
No, you're missing. I said we. No, when you're coaching the BOKS around then.
Sorry.
The BOKS.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
so what could you take when you was
big difference.
I was about to put my boxing gloves on. And
no. Sorry, I actually interpreted it. I interpreted it as that as well. I remember those two tests. I think they were in. They were 2000. Anyway, those two tests. I think they were in early 2010, were they? Anyway, those two tests. I remember there was one in East London where
that's right.
For a while.
No, we took 50 in East London, but I said to the players, if we finished within 10 points of South Africa, I would shave my head, and they were so delighted. I think it was something like 9 points difference.
Yeah.
And they couldn't. They got into the change room and they already had the number 2 clippers there, where it took everything off. So, and then it is what it is. They once you put in a great performance like that, the Springboks really tightened up. They decided they were embarrassed by their performance. And in New Zealand, and where was it? We played in East London. In East London, they really got stuck in, and we conceded 50 points in that game, which was disappointing. We only really conceded. In fact, we only did concede 50 points twice. Once against England, where I was stupid enough to pick Mario with the flanker at scrum off. You talk about hybrid players. I didn't have a scrum off, so. I picked a 40 cap scrum flanker at scrum off, and obviously under pressure he really cracked. And we took 50 against England, and the other one was against South Africa. Otherwise, we were quite competitive.
You mentioned for hybrid players now. Sorry, I'm sort of like digressing now. But when you talk about hybrid players, you've now made, when you talk about you using a loose forward at scrum half, you make me think that maybe we were ahead of the curve a long time ago, 1974. You're very Sonicus, yeah.
I think that was more that they didn't want to pick Roy McCallum, who was an English guy.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a couple of minutes left. I just ask quickly about Nick, your thoughts on the Lions so far. Do you think the Wallabies are going to have any chance to avoid a 3-0?
I do think so. I think I'm worried. I'm not worried. I mean, it'd be quite. I'd be very happy if the Australians performed well against the Lions, because we don't want to see an Australian team down at number 9 in the world. I don't care what people say. We want the Southern Hemisphere to remain strong, and they've won 2 World Cups. They've been content. They've won Tri-Nations before, and they were in a downward spiral. So I think what Joe Schmidt has done has been outstanding. He's brought together a group of players, and he's playing a very measured style of rugby. It's not just touch rugby and get out there and barbarian style nonsense that was being played at the last World Cup. This is a really structured game, good kicking game, better on defense, and they had a good Northern Hemisphere tour, which would have given them a lot of confidence. And when I look at the Lions, I say, who are their big heavies? Who are their big ball carriers who are going to worry Australia? We've got quite a few. We've got Eben, our props, our Peter Steph, the toy. We can chuck in anywhere 5 guys who can carry, and our centers carry well as well. But I look at those Lions and I see Mario Toje, well, perhaps, but not really. He could be a blindside flank as well as a lock. I like the Irish lock. He's a big bruiser, but will he play with Mario Toje, or are they both front of the line-out jumpers? And then at loose forward, no one really who can dent the opposition and give you momentum on the front foot. So I think Australia in with a chance. I'm not so negative about their chances as most people are. The people in the Northern Hemisphere, I think the Lions are going to go 3-0. Maybe they do, but I'll be surprised. I think it's going to be closer than that.
Gav, your thoughts?
Well, I think I've said to you before that I do think that the Lions will win. Whether it's 3-0 or not, I don't know. But I think that I'd be surprised if Australia actually did win a test, to be honest. But you've got to see what selections he comes up with. It's very embryonic stage of that tour now. I don't think that losing to Argentina was a train smash. I think it was ridiculous that they actually started out by warming up against a nation that is actually ranked higher than the nation that they're playing against. I mean, to me that was completely idiotic. So I don't read too much into the Argentina result.
Yeah, I think the one thing that does worry me a bit for Australia is just the momentum that the Lions will pick up, because I'm not sure the provincial teams, especially if they're not going to have their Wallabies around, are going to, they're going to gain quite a bit of momentum going through all these provincial games. And even that Australia-New Zealand game, it's going to be a bit like a Barbarians game where will the guys be together for enough time to put up a bit of a fight? So I think that's a big thing that worries me for Australia, that Lions may have a lot of momentum coming into the tests.
But then momentum that works the other way, because they complained
True.
a lot after this last series against us here, that they didn't have strong enough opposition and they won too easily. So that Western Force performance was actually more competitive, I thought, than a lot of what they encountered when they played here in 2021. But remembering, of course, that we were coming out of COVID, and none of our players weren't coming out of COVID. We were still in COVID, and none of our top players were able to go anywhere near the team because of the health protocols and so forth. So I think that's I don't know. I've just got a bit of a negative. Maybe Nick's watched more Super Rugby than I have. I haven't watched that much Super Rugby, but I watched the Chiefs beating the Brumbies, and I knew that this Brumbies team was much hyped, and some people had said, this is going to be a good game, and the Chiefs won quite comfortably, and I think I was a little bit let down by that. So, my sort of impressions of the Wallabies is built around what happened last year rather than what might be building in Australia. Because, to be completely honest, I haven't watched enough Super Rugby.
I agree. I think we're going to probably leave it there for today. I think we'll have a lot more context next time we chat after the first Italy test. Nick, good luck in your travels, and hopefully we chat to you next week again. And
No, it's lovely to chat to you two guys. When you talk about rugby, I can, as you can hear, it's a subject I can stick on for 24 hours a day.
No, that's great. No, Thanks, guys, and we'll be back next week after the Loftus test. Have a lot more to chat about.
Cheers. Keep well.
Thanks, Nick.